As the sun set and the room grew dimly lit, Mr. Johnson, our mature protagonist, found himself in a situation he had only read about in his favorite smutty novels, a hot wife scenario. His wife, Victoria, was a stunning 40-year-old with curves that would make most 20-year-olds jealous. She had been feeling adventurous lately and suggested they try something new together. "All right, darling," Mr. Johnson said, trying to keep his cool. "This is uncharted territory for me, but I'm willing to give it a shot." Victoria giggled and purred, her eyes glinting with anticipation. She had spent hours preparing, dressing up in an outrageously sexy outfit that emphasized her hourglass figure, painting her nails red, and even applying a hint of gloss on her lips. "Now, honey," she began, "the rules are simple. You're going to watch me get frisky with another man. But don't worry. It's all for your pleasure." Mr. Johnson swallowed hard and tried to remind himself that this was all part of their newfound sexual adventure. He couldn't deny the excitement churning in his stomach. "The first rule is," Victoria continued, "you must remain completely uninvolved. You're not allowed to touch me or interfere in any way." "But what if I want to intervene?" Mr. Johnson asked, his voice quavering with desire. "Then you'll have to deal with the consequences," she replied, smirking seductively. The atmosphere in their bedroom shifted as Victoria began to undress her playmate for the evening, a well-built personal trainer named Brad, who looked like he'd just stepped off the cover of a romance novel. As Victoria and Brad engaged in an intimate embrace, Mr. Johnson couldn't help but feel a mix of arousal and anxiety. He was eager to see how this would play out, yet worried about the consequences if things got too heated. He decided then that this was indeed an experience he wouldn't soon forget, one that might just breathe new life into their marriage. "Remember," Victoria whispered in Mr. Johnson's ear before leaving her husband alone with his thoughts, "you're on your own tonight." With those words, she disappeared into the other room, leaving him to contemplate what it meant to be truly involved or uninvolved in a hot wife scenario. Mr. Johnson found himself torn between his wife's instructions and his natural instinct as a husband to protect and possess her. His pulse raced as Victoria and Brad grew increasingly intimate on the other side of the room. He glanced around nervously, wondering if he should pretend to be engrossed in something else or step in if things escalated. Suddenly, he remembered his earlier resolution to embrace this adventure wholeheartedly. Taking a deep breath, Mr. Johnson decided to trust both himself and his wife. He settled back into the plush couch they'd set up for their little rendezvous, determined to watch the scene unfold without interfering. As Victoria and Brad continued their passionate play, Mr. Johnson realized that he wasn't as detached from the situation as he had initially thought. The sight of his beautiful wife in the hands of another man stirred feelings within him, a potent mix of pride, desire, and perhaps a hint of jealousy. But he reminded himself of the rules: no touching or interfering. He would observe, enjoy, and, most importantly, respect his wife's desires. And so, with each steamy glance Victoria exchanged with her playmate, Mr. Johnson found himself sinking deeper into this tantalizingly unfamiliar world of erotic exploration. As the night wore on, Victoria and Brad's intimacy reached new heights. The moans of pleasure from their writhing bodies echoed through the room, filling every corner with a heady mix of lust and satisfaction. Mr. Johnson couldn't help but feel a swell of pride at the thought of his wife bringing another man to the brink of ecstasy. He was simultaneously captivated by her sensual prowess and painfully aware of how much he wanted her back in his arms. But when Victoria finally emerged from their hidden corner, clad in nothing but a satin robe that clung tightly to her curves, Mr. Johnson knew it was time for them to face the consequences of their actions. "Did you learn anything interesting tonight?" she asked coyly, sliding back under the covers beside him. Her breath was still heavy with desire, and the scent of sex lingered between them like a tantalizing cloud. "I suppose I did," Mr. Johnson said softly, his voice tinged with newfound vulnerability. "But I'm not sure if it was something I'll be comfortable with in the long run." Victoria merely smiled and brushed a lock of hair off her forehead before responding. "Well, darling," she whispered, Remember that this was our way of keeping things exciting in our relationship. We tried something new, and it brought us closer together. She paused for a moment, then added, "But if you're not completely comfortable with what happened tonight, we can revisit the rules or even discuss drawing boundaries for future adventures. Our love is based on trust, after all." Her words were like balm to Mr. Johnson's anxieties. He took her hand and gave it a reassuring squeeze. "Thank you," he said earnestly. "I think I just needed some time to process everything. But you're right, we tried something new together, and that's what has always made our relationship special." A smile bloomed on Victoria's face, and she leaned in for a gentle kiss. "Then let's continue exploring each other," she said softly, her voice laced with love and promise. "As long as we're always honest with one another, there's nothing we can't handle together." And so their adventure continued not just through the realm of sensual exploration, but also through the labyrinthine paths of emotional trust and intimacy. The end.